Mayor, do you think red lines for the Russians have been crossed at this point, and what do you think the outcome is likely to be?
No, I would agree with Karen. I think even if they have been, I don't think there's too much coming by way of any fresh response. Pretty much everything that was in the toolkit has been deployed, other than, of course, something that none of us would want. And I think that's something that should worry us. At what point are you cornered enough to think about? Let's be honest here. I think, let me, Ian, go back to your conversation with Alex. I think the difference, or with Karen, in fact, with Russia and Putin, I think you came out with two distinctions, Russians and Putin. I think one of the trends we need to watch as we look ahead is, will that distance increase or will that now start converging? And if it starts converging, then we are in for a terrible decade in Europe. Because we know a Russian society which unites against some sense of assault is resilient. And we could be in for a long haul. So I think that is a good trend to watch, the distinction between Russians and Putin. And the second is the equilibrium you mentioned earlier, Ian. I don't think the two equilibriums that work are desirable for both. One is, of course, a certain annexation of a certain territory, and we create a new line in the map, and everyone lives happily ever after. That's not going to happen now. So that equilibrium is not on the table and is not certainly going to lead to peace. The second is a complete Russian retreat. Basically go back to the pre-Crimea times and literally make peace and begin new. That the Russians are not going to agree to. And I agree with Alex that even if you were to think about regime change, I fear that the next person who comes in will not come here to undo what Putin did, but to complete what Putin wants to do. And I think that is also a risk we should be considering as we think about it. So I think we are in for a tough period ahead. It's difficult to predict.
Now, Karen, how much of a Russian retreat should the West want? In other words, I mean, you hear the NATO allies that are saying, oh, we could take them out of Crimea potentially. I mean, clearly the interest in all the territory that was taken post-February 24th, but what about that was informally occupied? What about the attacks that are on Belgrade? What about the degradation of the Russian military? I mean, different Western leaders have said different things about what the desired outcome is. What do you think the West should be looking for as an outcome here?
The West is saying it's up to the Ukrainians, obviously, to decide when they want to compromise and how. I think the Russians, they're pulling back to a degree, but as Samir is saying, it's just so hard to know what they can go back home and describe as a victory. So sorry, I got cream in my eyes. It's hard to know. I'm sorry, I'm distracted a bit. Ian, could you start over with a question?
No, sure.
Yeah.
The question was, what do you think the Western interest should be?
Right, and at the moment we're seeing divisions starting to appear even amongst NATO allies. I think the French and the Germans want more of a compromise. The Americans in particular are now saying, that victory is possible. NATO Secretary General has even said Ukraine could win this, whereas before...
Yeah, and the Germans and the French privately are saying we should not be saying that the Ukrainians can win this, right? So I'm asking, where do you come down on that and why?
Yeah, look, it really depends on how long this goes on for, because I think, Russia could just go for broke. It's hard to see any of us living with Putin after this. I think we'll probably talk about this a bit later, but assuming that they win this somehow, I don't see how any Western country can shake his hand in the future. He is already an international pariah. So there, in a sense, there's no going back to where we were with Putin. Some countries may, but many Western countries won't. And then what does that mean for him? Is he going to feel so much against the wall that he may do something really scary, which many of us are worrying about, something like a nuclear weapon or tactical nukes? Or will he just declare victory and try to rearm and prepare to go back again? But while he is alive, while he is a president of Russia, I don't think he's ever going to give up on this vision that Ukraine is part of Russia.
Now, Alex, of course I have to go to Finland. You told me a couple of months ago that Finland was going to join NATO. You were a little bit ahead of the country, but not by much. They clearly are moving in that direction very fast. The Russians initially said, there would be military consequences. There was some nuclear saber rattling. It feels, at least in the last few days, they've walked that back a little bit. Is that an accurate read? How do you see the Russian reaction to what is almost certainly, or certainly likely, to be an expansion of NATO to involve a very significant piece of the Russian border?
Yeah, I guess we should go back. I've been an advocate of Finnish NATO membership for the better part of 30 years. Very much in the minority, but things in Finland changed overnight on the 24th of February. We used to be 50% against, 20% in favor. Overnight, it was the other way around. Now the latest opinion poll is roughly 80% in favor. So it's a bit North Korea in it, I must admit. And the parliament voted 188 in favor and 8 against.
First time I've heard you compare those two countries.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But so basically, it was something driven by rational fear. And the whole idea was that Finnish security policy has been based on a combination of idealism and realism. Idealism in the sense that we wanted bona fide to cooperate with Russia. When you have 1,340 kilometers of border with Russia, you want them to be more like Sweden than, like what they are, right? But then at the same time, we have one of the largest standing militaries in Europe with 900 reserves, myself and Kure Björklund included. We have 280,000 that we can mobilize in wartime. We have 62 F-18s. We just bought 64 F-35s, and we didn't buy them because of Stockholm, right? So this was the sort of balance. Now, the Russian reaction has actually been very moderate. When Putin and Lavrov say that Finnish and Swedish NATO membership is not a threat to Russian security, then you know that we're okay. So it's been very moderate. We expect some cyber attacks, home pages going down, perhaps the banking system attacked, a lot of information stuff, but conventionally, no.
But what's your theory for why they've backed down publicly the way they have?
Well, two reasons. One is that they will see Finnish and Swedish NATO membership as a Nordic model of the alliance. So that means that you've had Norway, Iceland, and Denmark as members since the foundation in 1949, and they haven't seen them as threats. So in that sense, they don't see our enlargement as an aggressive one. I think it was pretty cool, actually, that my president said when he was asked in a press conference with Boris Johnson that who should be blamed for this, he said, I think Putin should look himself in the mirror. That, this is Putin's enlargement. And in that sense, it's not an aggressive one. And I think they'll be quite calm about it in the future. The second reason is, I think the Russian military, I'm not an expert, but it is struggling in Ukraine right now. And you can't multitask. You can't go onto two fronts. And they want to keep the eye on the ball in Ukraine at the moment, because this war is, as much as I'd like to say that, mixing Putin, this is Putin's war. It's about his legacy. He wants to see himself next to the Russian greats, Stalin, Peter the Great. He wants to see a historic Russia with one language, one religion, and one leader. He's not going to give up this. So in that sense, he's focused on that, and that's why he doesn't have time that much for Finnish and Swedish NATO membership. Looks like Turkey has more time for that at the moment.